I never thought I'd end up in a standoff with my own HOA, but here we are. It all started when I planned a quiet weekend getaway at my cabin in the mountains, the one I've owned and maintained for years. It's tucked away off a gravel road, peaceful, private, my little slice of heaven. But when I pulled up that Friday evening, something was different. A heavy-duty metal gate now blocked the only access road leading up to my cabin, and there was a shiny new sign nailed to it: private property, no access without HOA approval. My name wasn't on that approval list. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe some new security update or an overzealous board member trying to flex authority. I called, emailed, even stopped by the HOA office the next morning. They were firm. Access had been restricted, and I wasn't allowed through without a written permit. No real explanation, no negotiation, just locked out of my own property. But here's the twist. They didn't know something I did. That narrow gravel road they just blocked. I own it. The land deed says it clear as day. They'd blocked me from my own cabin using a road that legally belongs to me. I've maintained that path for years, paid taxes on it, even cleared snow every winter. And they built a gate on *my land* without ever asking. At first, I was stunned. Then I got mad. I could have gone straight to a lawyer, but instead, I decided to play it smart. I wanted to see just how far they'd take it, how deep this HOA would dig their own hole. So I played along, pretended I was confused, kept quiet, while gathering every piece of proof I had. And what I found out next made everything worse for them. Let's just say they picked the wrong property owner to mess with. But what happened when I confronted them? That's when the real story began. So here I was, locked out of my own cabin, standing in front of a gate sitting on land I legally owned. I had the deed, the survey maps, everything lined up. But before jumping into a full-on fight, I wanted to understand what changed. Why now? Why would the HOA suddenly block that road when, for years, nobody had an issue with it? Turns out there were new board members. A few months earlier, the HOA had elections and brought in a couple of people who, from what neighbors told me, were big on cleaning things up and tightening rules. I guess part of that plan meant putting up gates and claiming more control over the area, even over parts they didn't really own. They'd probably assumed no one would push back. Most of the folks around here either rent out their places or only visit a couple weekends a year. They probably didn't expect someone like me to notice or to have receipts. I drove back into town and started pulling records. County land ownership maps, easement agreements, utility lines, anything that proved what I already knew. That stretch of road they blocked was mine. I even found an old agreement from years ago when the HOA actually asked for temporary access to use that road during repairs, and I said yes back then. That made it even clearer that they knew it wasn't theirs to control. But the more I dug, the stranger things got. A neighbor told me there were whispers that someone on the board wanted to reroute traffic away from certain cabins. Less desirable ones, they said. Cabins that weren't part of their little group. Suddenly, this felt less like a mistake and more like a plan. A sneaky, quiet move to cut people off. I knew then this wasn't just about a gate. This was about control. And maybe even more than that. Maybe property values, maybe personal agendas. I wasn't sure yet, but I was ready to find out. The next step, I had to go face to face with the board. I just didn't know how far they'd go to keep things hidden. When I finally got a chance to meet with the HOA board, I kept calm. I walked into that meeting room with a binder full of documents, property lines, legal descriptions, photos from before the gate went up. I laid everything out on the table, polite but firm. I explained that not only did they block access to my private property, but they installed a structure on land that legally wasn't theirs. You'd think that would have ended it right there. But instead of backing off, they doubled down. One of the board members, a guy named Mark, leaned forward and said something that caught me off guard. We're just enforcing community standards. If there's a conflict, we'll let the courts figure it out. That's when I realized they weren't backing down because they didn't believe me. They were hoping I wouldn't have the time or resources to fight them. Classic power play. Meanwhile, I started hearing more from other homeowners. A couple down the hill told me their cabin was suddenly out of compliance because of an old shed the HOA claimed was too close to the property line, after 20 years of it sitting there untouched. Another neighbor, who had been renting out their place on weekends, was now being fined for supposed unauthorized commercial use. It wasn't just me. They were targeting anyone who didn't fit their new image of the community. That's when it clicked. The new HOA board wasn't just enforcing rules, they were trying to reshape the whole area. Push out the long-timers, tighten control, maybe even drive property prices up for a select few, and blocking my road. That was part of the plan. If they could isolate certain cabins, make them hard to access, they could turn the pressure up without ever saying a word. I tried to stay quiet, keep investigating, but someone tipped them off. A week later, I got a letter in the mail, certified official. The HOA was threatening legal action for trespassing if I attempted to bypass the gate, on my own road. It was getting personal now, and I still hadn't told them what I was planning next. After receiving that letter threatening me with legal action for trespassing on my own road, things escalated quickly. I felt the pressure mounting, not just from the HOA but from the uncertainty of what would happen next. I kept replaying the fact that they were willing to go to court, or worse, try to physically block me from accessing my property permanently. It felt surreal. How could a homeowners association wield so much power over something I owned outright? I decided to document everything. Every call, every message, every interaction with the HOA. I even installed a couple of cameras facing the gate, hoping to catch any unauthorized activity or attempts to block me further. The tension in the neighborhood was thick. Some neighbors started avoiding me, afraid to get involved. Others quietly expressed support, but were too scared to speak up publicly. It was like the HOA's shadow had cast over the entire community. One evening, as I pulled up to the gate, I found fresh tire marks leading up to it, and worse, a brand new lock had been slapped on, even though I hadn't given permission. That was the last straw. This wasn't just about rules or property lines anymore. It was about control and intimidation. I was cut off from my own cabin, a place that was supposed to be my refuge. But just when I thought I'd hit rock bottom, something unexpected happened. A late-night call from a neighbor who said they had found some old documents hidden away in the county records that could change everything. Papers that showed the HOA's claims didn't just lack merit, they were based on flawed or even falsified information. My heart raced as I realized this might be the key to turning the tide. But if the HOA board caught wind of what was coming, they'd stop at nothing to keep it buried. I was standing on the edge of a battle that was about to get even messier, and the moment of confrontation was fast approaching. Would I be able to get through that gate and reclaim access to my cabin? Or was this just the beginning of a long, brutal fight? The stakes were higher than ever, and I knew whatever happened next could change everything. Just as I was gearing up to use those new documents to challenge the HOA, something unexpected hit me like a ton of bricks. A message popped up on my phone from one of the newer board members, someone I hadn't met yet. It wasn't a threat or a demand, but a warning. You should be careful digging too deep. Not everyone in the neighborhood wants this conflict to get worse. That was strange enough, but what came next really shook me. That same night, I got a knock on my cabin door. It was a neighbor I barely knew, someone who usually kept to themselves. They handed me an envelope and slipped away before I could ask questions. Inside were copies of emails between board members, emails that suggested the whole gate and road blockade was only part of a bigger scheme. Apparently, the HOA was in talks with a developer, someone looking to buy up multiple properties and turn the area into a private resort or gated community. Blocking my access wasn't just about control, it was about making my cabin and a few others inconvenient enough to force owners to sell. I felt like the rug had been pulled out from under me. This wasn't just a fight over a road anymore. This was about my home, my investment, and the future of the entire neighborhood. And it wasn't just me against the HOA. It was me against powerful interests with money and influence behind them. That's when I realized why some neighbors had been so quiet. Some had probably already sold out or were in on the plan. The tension around here wasn't just legal or personal anymore. It was almost like a turf war, with my cabin caught right in the middle. I knew I couldn't wait any longer. Armed with those leaked emails and my property deeds, I decided to confront the HOA one last time. This time, I wasn't going in blind. I had a plan: show up at their next meeting, lay out everything: the road I owned, the illegal gate, and the secret talks about turning our neighborhood into some exclusive resort. I was ready to fight, not just for my cabin, but for every neighbor who was getting pushed aside. The day of the meeting arrived, and tension was thick in the air. I walked in with the documents and a quiet confidence I hadn't felt in weeks. When I started presenting the evidence, the room shifted. Some board members looked caught off guard, others avoided my gaze. I called out the illegal blockade on my private road, the threats of trespassing charges, and the shady developer deal that could change everything. For a moment, it felt like I had won. The HOA president grudgingly agreed to remove the gate, at least temporarily, and promised to investigate the developer connection. I thought the nightmare was finally over. But then, just as I was about to leave, the president leaned in and dropped the bombshell: "You're not the only one with secrets." He pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Inside were documents showing that years ago, part of my property had been mistakenly recorded as belonging to the HOA, a clerical error that explained why they believed they had some claim over the access road. That meant my ownership wasn't as solid as I thought. I felt the floor shake beneath me. After fighting so hard, the truth was messy. Ownership wasn't black and white. It was tangled in paperwork mistakes that neither side had fully realized until now. So the fight wasn't over. It was just changing shape. I had won a battle, but the war for my cabin's future and my rightful access was far from settled. And with new revelations like that, the stakes were higher than ever. What would happen next? I was left wondering if I could finally secure my slice of peace, or if the HOA's grip would tighten once again. After the meeting, I realized this fight was going to take more patience and persistence than I ever expected. That clerical error complicated things, but it didn't erase years of me using and maintaining that access road. I knew I had to get a clear legal title sorted out, so I hired a property lawyer who specialized in boundary disputes and HOA conflicts. Together, we started working through the paperwork, gathering affidavits from neighbors, and getting a surveyor to officially map the road and property lines. Over the next few weeks, things slowly started to shift. The HOA agreed to remove the gate temporarily while the legal process played out, and the developer talks quietly faded as more people became aware of the situation. A few neighbors who had been silent stepped forward to support me, sharing their own stories of unfair treatment from the board. It felt like a small community was standing up together, not letting the HOA steamroll over us. I learned a lot through this ordeal, not just about property rights and HOA power dynamics, but about the importance of standing up for what's yours, even when it feels overwhelming. Having that cabin, that private getaway, means more than just a place to relax. It's a symbol of ownership, of hard work, and of the peace I fought so hard to protect.